Namaskar, welcome to Kalam IAS. This is Vasudev Singh Bhati, and today we are going to discuss the mains 2024 questions of economy section in GS3. So GS3 paper, there are 20 questions, and out of 20 questions, 4 comes from economy section and 4 from the agriculture section. Today we are going to discuss the 4 questions which were from the economy section. That is question number 1, 2, 11 and 12. Every year we see the weightage of economy and agriculture in the GS3 has remained constant. It is around 50 marks for economy section and 50 marks for agriculture every year from the past 5 years. So this year also the pattern remained same, 50 marks from economy section, 50 marks from agriculture section, 4 questions each. So the 4 questions for economy section, the first was regarding the patterns and trends of public expenditure on social services in the post reforms period and whether they have been in consonance with achieving the objectives of inclusive growth. The second question is the causes of persistent high food inflation. Food inflation was in news and because of which this question was asked. And what is the effectiveness of monetary policy of RBI to control the same. Third question is discuss the merits and demerits of the labor codes. So labor codes were introduced in the 2020 but they have not been asked yet. So this year they asked the question on labor codes and what has been the progress in this regard. And the 12th question was, what is the need for expanding the regional air connectivity in India? And in this context, discuss the government's UDAN scheme and its achievements. So there were 4 questions, 2 questions, the question number 1 and question number 2. Both of them were directly from the Economic Survey 23-24. So this year's Economic Survey, there is a separate chapter. This year's Economic Survey, there is a separate chapter, chapter number 7, which talks about public expenditure on social services, and the name of the chapter is public expenditure on social sector. And we have discussed this chapter in the classes also, that when we were doing the Economic Survey 23-24, we discussed how the public expenditure on social sector is changing and what are the different indicators of social sectors which have changed. For example, Gini coefficient is decreasing and etc. So these things also we talked about, and UPSC asked a question on the public expenditure on social services. So if you had watched the class, this could have been doable question. And apart from that, this question is linked to the inclusive growth. So we will go into how to answer this question. So before answering the question, you need to decode the question itself. The question is divided into 2 parts. First part is asking patterns and trends of public expenditure on social services. Second part is asking to what extent this has been in consonance with achieving the objectives of inclusive growth. So in the introduction, so here we see that the patterns and trend in public expenditure on social services is the connecting theme between both the questions. There are 2 questions. First asking what is the pattern and trend of public expenditure on social services. Second part is asking to what extent what is this public expenditure on social services has been in consonance with achieving inclusive growth. So in this introduction, we will start with public expenditure on social services. If we have any data, we can start with the data. If we want to define it, we can define it. If we want to give example, we can give example. But we will start with, public expenditure on social services. What are the major changes which have happened in the approach to the public expenditure on social services? After that, in the body part, first heading would be patterns and trends of public expenditure on social services post reforms period. And second part would be how public expenditure on social services helps in inclusive growth. And the third part would be challenges in achieving inclusive growth despite increase in public expenditure on social services. And then we will conclude with how the public expenditure on social services, the changing pattern of public expenditure on social services is helping us achieve the inclusive growth as well as different government targets. We can talk about, Viksit Bharat, the dream of Viksit Bharat by 2047. So for the introduction, we can start with post-1991 reforms. The Indian concept of welfare has been significantly transformed into a more long-term oriented, efficient and empowering avatar as mentioned in Economic Survey 2024. So this line is taken directly from this Economic Survey 23-24, and they have talked about that the public expenditure on social services, it has they changed from a short-term oriented to long-term oriented and efficient and empowering avatar. Apart from that, we can also start with by defining the public expenditure on social services. So either of these 2 introduction you can start, and it's fine. So you can start with public expenditure on social services refers to government spending on education, healthcare, housing and welfare to improve citizens' well-being. So very simple, very, even if you do not have data, even if you not read the economic survey, you should read the economic survey. But even if you have not read it, you can start with a general definition of public expenditure on social services, whatever your understanding is, and give a few examples like education, healthcare, and you're done. And then you will give the first subheading. First subheading is patterns and trends of public expenditure on social services in the post-reforms period. So the first point would be increase in allocation on public expenditure on social services. For example, in the 1990s, the public expenditure on social services had 5 to 6% of GDP, which increased to 7.8% in this year. Again, you had to read the economic survey to answer this question. Otherwise, the answer would be a very generic answer. So, to write a very specific answer as per the demand of the question, you need to have content, and the content was there in the economic survey 23-24. After that, you can write about, the public expenditure on social services. The allocation has increased to 26% of the total budget. So it shows that the government focus on public expenditure on social services is increasing. Apart from that, we can also talk about different sectors of public expenditure on social services and how far is their contribution in the, in the budget or in the GDP, how far is the government is focusing on these sectors. So we can start with education. Education, we know that the budget allocation is around 3%. Even if you do not remember the exact data, that 2.7%, you can write around 3% of the GDP is spent on the education budget every year. So this shows that government is focusing on education. And healthcare, so we had the data here. Healthcare, the expenditure increased from 0.9% to 1.9% in 2024. So that is around 20 years, 25 years, the expenditure has increased from 1% to around 2%. But even if you did not have this data, you could have at least written that, the government expenditure on healthcare has increased to 2% by 2024. And after that, you can write about different welfare schemes which the government has introduced for, welfare of the people, for the social services. For example, MG-NREGA, Right to Education Act, National Food Security Act, etc. You could have written a separate point for these also. So, if you are writing about education, if you are writing about healthcare, if you are writing about National Food Security Act, the Right to Education Act, the MG-NREGA Act, etc. So, I think your answer is acceptable here. Because the data about, what is the percentage of public expenditure on social services in the budget or in the GDP, it's very difficult that you have this data. But if you have this, then it would be a perfect answer. Even if you do not have this, you could have written these points. After that, we can also write, state versus central expenditure. Again, this was given in this year's economic survey, that the state share has gradually increased in public expenditure on social services to 55% compared to 45% of the center. So state's contribution has increased to 55% compared to center's 45%. And finally, we can talk about the recent trends in social services spending, where in 2017-18 this social services spending was around 11 lakh crore, which has increased to 23.5 lakh crore this year. So this again shows that increasing focus on public expenditure on social services. So to answer this question, to the point as per the demand of the question, very crisp points, you have to have read the economic survey 23-24 and at least have written 3-4 data points from the chapter 7, because we know that every chapter we will write 4-5 lines about every chapter in our notes, so that if there is a question, then we can answer it. So this year the question was there directly from the chapter number 7 of economic survey 23-24 about public expenditure on social sector, and there were a lot of content given there. Even if you had 3-4 points from there, you write those 3-4 points in this answer, and your answer will be unique, and your answer will be the best answer among the average answer that others are writing, because students have not written a very good answer to this question. After that, we will move to second subheading, inclusive growth through public expenditure on social services. So first, we should focus, how the inclusive growth has happened through public expenditure on social services, with the focus on the social infrastructure. For social infrastructure, we can talk about toilets, 11.7 crore toilets we have built under the Swachh Bharat mission. We can talk about the housing under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, 3.5 crore Pakka houses have been built. We can also talk about, the water connection provided under Jal Jeevan Mission, 11.7 crore households provided tap water connection under Jal Jeevan Mission. After that, we can write about reduction in poverty. For example, multidimensional poverty has reduced from 36% to 11% as per the Niti Aayog. Improvement in, human development indexes, indicators, for example, health, the maternal mortality rate has dropped from 374 to 97. In education, the higher education, gross enrollment ratio has increased from 10% to 27%. So these data we can give. Finally, we will write 2-3 points about challenges to inclusive growth. So we have divided this question into 3 parts. First, the patterns and trends of public expenditure on social services. Second, consonance with achieving inclusive growth. Third, challenges in achieving inclusive growth, and then the conclusion. So in this we will write about gender inequality is rising. India's rank is 129 out of 146. Among the poverty, we can still say it is high. 11% people are multidimensionally poor as per National Multidimensional Poverty Index. Rising inequality, we can talk about rising inequality. There can be many more points in challenges to inclusive growth regarding health, regarding education, regarding standard of living, regarding the inequality in wealth, inequality in income, urban and rural inequality, the eastern states versus the northwestern states inequality. So there are several points which can be written here. Whatever comes to your mind is correct. I have given just 3 points. There can be more than 10 points here, but we do not need to write 10 points. We can write just 3-4 points in this answer and then move forward to the conclusion. And the conclusion, what we are going to do is, we are going to bring all the keywords which are given in the question. We are going to combine them, make a sentence and give a futuristic answer. So we can write, India was on the path to scaling the next level of development ladder in the developed India step by 2047, Viksit Bharat as envisioned in the Economic Survey 23-24. So this statement is again given in the Economic Survey 23-24. Apart from that, the other conclusion could be that the increasing focus of government on public expenditure on social services will help us achieve the inclusive growth as well as the objective of Viksit Bharat by 2047. So this could be our conclusion. So that is it. If you have written everything, if you have divided this answer into 3 parts and you have addressed all the 3 parts, you have written some data points to support your arguments, you have written 3-4 points in every part, then your answer is complete. You can, expect around 40 to 50% marks in this answer. Otherwise, scoring would be low. Second question, what are the causes of persistent high food inflation in India? Comment on the effectiveness of the monetary policy of the RBI to control this type of inflation. Now, this question again is directly from Economic Survey 23-24 because the focus on, food inflation was there. So food inflation is explained in the Economic Survey 23-24 separately, and we also discussed it in the class. What are the causes of food inflation? Why the prices of tomato and onion are rising? Why the prices of pulses is rising? Why the prices of milk is rising? So different, aspect of food inflation, different components of food, which, increased, the prices increase because of the various factors we discussed in the class. And if you have read the Economic Survey, then you can do it very easily. Even if you have not read the Economic Survey, this question can be answered, but the answer would not be as effective. That's it. So to answer this question again, how to structure the answer? First, we will start with introduction, where we will talk about the trends of food inflation and the core inflation in the past few years, so that we can talk about how the food inflation is, more than core inflation. Then body part, we will divide it into 3 parts. First would be, first we will show a small graph showing, food inflation in the past 2-3 years, how the food inflation has increased in the past 2-3 years. Then first subheading would be different causes behind food inflation in recent years. So causes of persistent high food inflation in India, we will give the subheading causes of persistent high food inflation in India, and we will write down 4-5 causes. After that, we will give the second subheading, effectiveness of monetary policy. In this, we will show both the positive impacts as well as the negative impacts. We will not show unidimensional answer. We will show both the dimension, positive as well as the negative. And then we will conclude with a futuristic conclusion about the, how the coordinated approach can help us bring down the food inflation. So for the introduction, we can write food inflation has been increasing consistently from past 2 years and has remained above core inflation. in financial year 23-24. And then after that, if you want to write that, it is above the RBI target of 6%, you can write it. Even if you want to avoid it, you can avoid it. This much introduction is enough in a 10 marker. And then after that, we will straight go to a graph. In this graph, we will show that the core inflation has reduced from 6% to 4.3% in past 2 years, whereas food inflation has increased from 3.8% to 7.5% in the past 2 years. So you do not need to write the data of all the 3 years, but financial year 22 and 24 is sufficient to show that the core inflation is reducing, whereas the food inflation is increasing. And so you justify your statement that you made in the introduction that food inflation has remained above core inflation in the past 2 years, which is in the financial year 23 and 24. And then we will give the first subheading, that is the causes of persistent high food inflation in India. And we'll start with supply side constraints, that because of weather conditions like droughts, floods, etc., the food inflation is high because it impacts the overall productivity. As per Economic Survey 23-24, the extreme climate events reduce the food output by 15 to 20%. So Economic Survey talks about that, the food production reduced by 15 to 20%. So as a result, the food prices increased. Other reason is crop disease. Again, this is given in Economic Survey 23-24, that tomato and onion prices surged due to crop diseases and logistic disruption impacting the production. Then other could be slower sowing in the Rabi season. This again is given in the Economic Survey 23-24, that in the Rabi season, the sowing is slow. As a result, the pulses, tur and urad, especially the tur and urad prices have increased. High animal feed cost. For example, the increase in this again is given in Economic Survey 23-24. All these 4 points are directly from the Economic Survey 23-24, and the fourth point is asking about, explaining about why the prices of milk increased in the past 2 years. The prices of milk increased because of high animal feed cost. Apart from that, you can also write generic points, high input cost. For example, the fertilizer, fuel, electricity, etc. The prices are increasing. Inelastic demand for essential commodities. The demand for food items is inelastic. So as a result, their price increases. Hoarding and supply bottlenecks exist in India. So hoarding is done by, stockists. Apart from that, supply bottlenecks also exist because of poor infrastructure. And MSP and procurement policy, again MSP, if we increase the MSP, as a result, the prices of food in the market will also increase. So these 4 were the generic points. Before that, there were 4 points which were given, in the Economic Survey 23-24. So if you write those 4 points, of course, it is going to be a better answer. But even if you do not have read the Economic Survey 23-24, you should have. But even if you have not read it 23-24 Economic Survey, then also you can write an average or above average answer by mentioning such points. And if you have certain data or example to substantiate after the point, then your answer is complete. Next, we will start with the subheading of the effectiveness of RBI monetary policy to control food inflation. So, what are the steps that RBI has taken? That is, we are going to write about under the successful. It increased the repo rate to 6.5% from 4%, and it has reduced the overall inflation from 6.7% to 5.4% in past 1 year. And RBI interest rate has helped in reducing the consumption of non-essential food items, and high interest rate and stable currency prices in the controlling prices of imported food items. So imported food items like the edible oil seeds, pulses, etc. We import a lot of food items. So the controlling of the exchange rate has again helped in controlling the imported food inflation that happened because of high exchange rate in the market. Other challenges faced in controlling the food inflation. First is, again this point is given in Economic Survey 23-24, that 50 to 60% inflationary pressure in the food are supply driven, making them less responsible to interest rate adjustment. So this says that the food inflation is supply driven. 50 to 60% pressure on the prices of food is because of supply side, and as a result, the responsiveness to interest rate change by RBI is very low. Next is food inflation increased from 6.6% to 7.5%. So RBI has not been successful in controlling the food inflation. Inelastic demand. for food items make it non-responsive to the monetary policy of RBI, and global price shocks. For example, the Russia-Ukraine war has resulted into high food inflation in all over the world. So as a result, the monetary policy of RBI will not be effective, or is a challenge for RBI to control the food inflation, because that is out of the control of the RBI. So we have discussed what RBI can do. We have discussed what are the challenges that the RBI is facing, and then we can give a generic conclusion, a way forward type conclusion also, that there is a need of coordinated approach for both monetary, fiscal and structural reforms to control food inflation and bring parity in food and core inflation. The food and core inflation should go hand in hand. There should be, there should not be much divergence. An RBI target of 4% plus minus 2% should be for food inflation also, along with headline inflation. So as we know, the RBI is given the target by Monetary Policy Framework Agreement to have 4% plus minus 2% headline inflation. The headline inflation should be in the range of 2% to 6%. So we can give a suggestion that the food inflation should also be made the targeted by RBI to be controlled in the range of 2 to 6%. And then we will move to the next question. Next question is question number 11. Discuss the merits and demerits of the 4 labor codes in the context of labor market reforms in India. What has been the progress so far in this regard? So the question is asking, what is the merits, what are the demerits, and what is the progress made in the 4 labor codes which are there in India. So there are 3 parts to this question. We will start with defining the labor codes. What is the labor code? So in the introduction, we will start with how many laws were there. We will write something about the labor codes, and then in the body part, first we will show in a flow chart the 4 labor codes. What are the name of the 4 labor codes? If there is a question on labor codes, the question is not asking the name of the 4 labor codes. The question is asking merits and demerits of the labor codes. But we have the scope. It is a 15-marker question, and we have a scope to write at least the name of the 4 labor codes which are there, to make our answer, to give more weightage to our answer. And then we will mention the merits of 4 labor codes, then demerits of 4 labor codes, and then progress made, in the labor codes. And finally, we will conclude with a futuristic conclusion. So, in introduction, we can write, labor codes are 4 laws consolidating 29 existing labor laws, aimed at simplifying regulations and improving labor market flexibility. So the purpose is to bring in labor market flexibility and to promote ease of doing business, and for that purpose 29 labor laws have been consolidated into 4 labor codes. If this information you have written in the introduction, and after that you draw this flow chart where you show the name of 4 labor codes: Code on Wages, Industrial Relation Code, Social Security Code, and Occupational Safety and Health and Working Condition Code. You write these 4 names, and then you write the first subheading, merits of the labor codes. First merit of the labor code is simplification of complex laws. So this we have written in the introduction also. 29 laws have been reduced to 4 codes. So it simplifies the complex laws, and so 29 central laws have been simplified into 4 labor codes. It brings uniformity across states because it provides standardized laws which can be implemented across the country. It extends the social security and minimum wages benefit to the unorganized workers, which are approximately 90% of the total workforce of the country. So it extended the social security benefits and minimum wages benefits to the unorganized workers. Flexibility in hiring and firing is given, as the Industrial Relation Code allows firms up to 300 workers to lay off employees without government approval, incentivizing employers to hire more. So the government is saying that we have increased the number of workers which can be laid off without the government approval to 300. As a result, the purpose is to incentivize companies to hire more workers. So this is the flexibility that is given in the hiring and firing, and the purpose is ease of doing business. So these 4 points can be written. Apart from that, we can also write social security provided for gig workers as per the Social Security Code, and streamlining inspections, the introduction of the web-based random inspections under the Occupational Safety Code reduces the Inspector Raj or removes the Inspector Raj, or in the other words we can say it promotes the transparency. Then last point could be women empowerment. Women empowerment is ensured as it promotes the gender equality, allowing women to work at night shift with safety provisions, even in the industries where it was not allowed earlier. So there are 7 points we have written here in the merits. You can write 4 or 5 there. 4 or 5 is more than sufficient. And then we will move to the demerits of the labor codes. What are the demerits of the labor codes? First is exemption for small businesses. Small businesses are not, the firms with less than 300 employees are exempted from key provisions. For example, laying off does not require government, approval, etc. So there are several exemptions which are given for small businesses, and most of the businesses in India, as we know, in the MSME sector, 99% organization are micro organization. Small and medium organization are, in rest of the 1%. So when 99% organizations are micro organization, then to which organization is the labor code is going to apply? So most of the workers, most of the employees will be left out of this, many regulations which are there in the labor codes. It weakens the collective bargaining because, trade union rights are diluted here, and it has been opposed by the trade unions a lot. Apart from that, we can also write increased flexibility in firing, as we saw that, under the new laws, up to 300 workers can be laid off without the government approval. Inadequate protection for the migrant workers. Migrant workers are not provided, protect under the code on social security. So that again is a drawback of the law. Lack of adequate representation for gig workers. Gig workers representation is very low in this, labor codes. So that is again a problem. Vague distinction between gig and platform workers. Gig and government has said that, we are going to provide social security benefits for the gig workers and the platform workers, but they have not actually defined what do they mean by gig workers and platform workers. There is, a huge vagueness existing in the definition given in the gig workers and the platform workers. Criticism from trade union. The major trade unions have opposed the 4 labor codes, and risk of regional disparity exists because of the labor codes, because the states have been given, leeway to frame the rules and implement these codes as per the requirement of the region. As a result, again, the purpose was to bring a uniformity across states, but this purpose can be defeated because the states have been given power to frame laws as per the need of the state. So these were the demerits of the labor codes. Now we will start with progress in implementation of the labor codes. The first is delayed implementation. As of 2024, the central government has delayed notifying the rules. So this you can write. After that, we can write about draft rules by states. Some states like MP and Gujarat have already framed the draft rules under the new codes, but implementation is inconsistent across the states. So draft rules itself, they have been not prepared by most of the states. Some states have prepared the draft rules, but again, implementation is inconsistent. Social security coverage expansion. The social security coverage expansion code includes provisions for gig and platform workers, yet state level implementation mechanism remain inadequate. So there are provisions for, gig and platform workers, but the mechanisms have not been defined well for how are they going to implement that. Now, we have discussed the progress made. We can now discuss the way forward, how to move forward. Whenever we discuss the challenges associated with any topic, we always write the way forward. So what could be the way forward here? First is cooperative federalism. Again, state and central should, implement labor codes by cooperative federalism. Promoting flexibility with protection. So there is need to balance the interest of the workers as well as the businesses by providing flexibility to businesses to hire and fire, along with providing job security to the workers. Incentivizing for compliances. So compliances should be incentivized for better, implementation of the code. And then finally, we can conclude. Again, whenever we want to conclude an answer in economy, what we can do is we can take a government target and use that target to frame a conclusion. So we will have a list of government targets, 10-15 targets, which can be used in multiple places. So here I have used the $10 trillion economy target, and I have written the conclusion: successful implementation of labor codes is key to achieve the target of $10 trillion economy that Economic Survey 21-22 set for the year 2035. And then we can move forward to the next question. What is the question number 12? What is the need for expanding the regional air connectivity in India? So why regional air connectivity should be expanded? Then in this context, discuss the government's UDAN scheme and its achievement. So we need to discuss UDAN scheme and its achievement. So there are again three parts. First part, we are going to talk about the need for regional air connectivity in India. Second part, we are going to talk about UDAN scheme, its features, its objectives, etc. And in the third part, we are going to talk about the achievements of the UDAN scheme. Again, content was required here. So structure I have already talked to you, what is going to be the structure here, and then we will start with the answer. In introduction, we can write a generic statement about Indian aviation industry. So we can write, India is the third largest aviation market in the world. UDAN scheme has played a pivotal role in making the regional air connectivity affordable and accessible in India. So we have written about both of these things, aviation industry of India and UDAN scheme. We have written that in the introduction. Then we can move to the first part of the answer, that is need for expanding the regional air connectivity in India. First is economic growth. Regional air connectivity promotes economic growth because businesses can travel and transport goods and services. As a result, economic growth happens. Second, accessibility for remote areas. Accessibility increases. For example, you can talk about the travel time to Ladakh reduced from 2 days to just 1 hour from Delhi to Ladakh. And third could be boosting of the tourism. Again, we have seen the Ladakh or Pakyong Airport in the Sikkim. Pakyong Airport in the Sikkim has increased tourism in these regions. Going to Sikkim, going to Ladakh, going to Meghalaya has become very easy now. And employment generation, again, whenever we are going to talk about the benefits of any scheme or any sector in in economy, we are going to talk about the growth rate, we are going to talk about the exports, and we are going to talk about employment generation. So regional air connectivity again provide employment to a lot of people by tourism, by hospitality, etc. sectors. Then we can write about reducing congestion. Because the regional air connectivity increases, small cities have airports now. As a result, the pressure on the big cities reduces as it diverts the traffic from big cities to the small cities. Facilitating emergency services, again this becomes possible when there is regional air connectivity. And encouraging local entrepreneurship increases, as you can give example of Bhuj Airport, where the handicraft and artisan workers of the Kutch region uses Bhuj Airport to export their goods in the international market, and it strengthens the national integration as people can move from one place to another very easily. Earlier, going to again northeastern areas or southern India was difficult, but due to UDAN scheme and due to regional air connectivity, it has become like in the morning I am in North India, in the evening I am in southern India, and next day I will be in the eastern India. That is possible. So it strengthens the national integration. Now we will write about UDAN scheme. So first we will write a generic statement about UDAN scheme, that it was launched as a regional connectivity scheme under the Ministry of Civil Aviation in 2016. Then we are going to write about the objectives of UDAN scheme: to develop the regional aviation market, to provide affordable, economically viable, profitable air travel on the regional routes to common man even in the small towns. Then we are going to write about different features of the UDAN scheme. First could be providing connectivity to the unserved and underserved airports. Second is revival of existing airstrips and airports. Third is scheme is operational for a period of 10 years. And the fourth could be subsidized airfare. For example, the subsidies for airfares have been, the prices have been capped at rupees 2,500 for 1 hour flight. So if there is a 1 hour flight, then maximum amount could be rupees 2,500. This capping was done under the UDAN scheme, and as a result, the prices of airfares in the country reduced. So what are the achievements of UDAN scheme? First is, of course, increased connectivity of different regions. As we have seen, the domestic routes have increased from 215 to 540 in the past 10 years. New airports have been opened up. As of 2023, UDAN scheme has connected 76 underserved airports. It encourages regional careers. So the regional careers also, regional companies also are coming up as a result of the Udan scheme. For example, Shankh Air recently received the approval of Ministry of Civil Aviation. Other achievements could be affordable air travel, as we know that the airfares have been capped for 1 hour flight to 2,500. Next is enhancing airport infrastructure through public-private partnership and viability gap funding, and increased passenger traffic. As of 2023, 70 million passengers have benefited from the Udan scheme, and attracting private sector investment by using viability gap funding. So these can be the achievements. Finally, we can write a conclusion that Udan scheme has been instrumental in government's objective of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas by connecting every state in India through airways. Again, what we have done is taken the key term which is there in the question, and then connected with a government target or a government vision. So government vision is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and we have used this to conclude this answer. So in all the answers, I had the conclusion prepared beforehand. For example, I have made a list of different government targets like Viksit Bharat, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, $10 trillion economy, doubling the farmers' income, etc. And I use these targets while writing the conclusion. One of these targets I will use, and I will link it with the key terms which is given in the question. And as a result, the conclusion will be an effective conclusion, because we know that the time is of essence here, and when we are finishing the answer, we do not have time to think of a good conclusion. So we need to prepare the conclusion beforehand. So this was the tip. And in next class, we are going to discuss the agriculture, the 4 questions of agriculture. All the 4 questions were directly from the notes, directly from the syllabus. And if you had prepared notes on the syllabus, it was very easy. We are going to discuss it in the next class. Till then, thank you very much.